It's 8:59 on the 25th of February 2022. Welcome to the Marxist think tank, the MTT News of the Week. Welcome, Jen. Good to see you.
Glad to be here.
Great. This week, it's a pretty slow week in terms of news. Obviously, I'm joking. It's not. We are dedicating this episode to the situation in Ukraine, the conflict in Ukraine. There is lots of other news to talk about. Ethiopian dam, the Renaissance Dam opening, lots of other politics, particularly in South Africa, and things going on. However, because of the scale of what's happening in Ukraine, we are going to dedicate this entire episode to covering what's happened, what is happening, how we got here, and other things. So, yes, that is what we're going to be talking about today. So the first thing I'll just mention is we're going to what's happened, the immediate situation. So it's less than 24 hours since the start of the operation in Ukraine. So Russian forces have entered Ukraine from many angles. So in the north, from Belarus.
More technical, it would be more accurate to call it the forces of the Collective Security Treaty Organization.
Right. Well, that's what I was getting to. That's what I was getting to. Yeah. So we've got forces from Russia entering from the north with Belarusian forces. So Belarusian forces with Russian forces entering Ukraine from the north. Russian forces also entered from the south, from Crimea, crossing the line there into Crimea in the south, and also then in the east. So from the DPR, the Donetsk People's Republic, and Luhansk People's Republic, DPR and LPR, that's what that stands for. They've entered Mariupol. There's lots of fighting in Mariupol, which is a big city next to Donbass, or in Donbass, I should say. The city of Kharkov seems to just be about to fall to Russian forces. There are tanks outside Chernobyl, the deactivated nuclear reactor there. Russian forces have been sighted near the reactor, near Chernobyl, which is north of Kiev. In Odessa, there were false reports of amphibious landings. There have been airstrikes and explosions, but no amphibious landing in Odessa. In Kiev, a military airport was taken by the Russians, and there have been other airstrikes and air sirens going off, as well as lots of other activity. But Kiev is still in Ukrainian hands. In other sort of news recently, the last 7 hours, multiple Russian government websites have gone offline. Specifically, and of particular interest is RT, Russia Today, the state broadcaster, which is one.
And the official website of the president of Russia and of Kremlin. So
right. So government websites as well as RT are down. I've just checked it now. I can't access it. It's down.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of immediate situation. So we're going to come back to the immediate situation in a minute after we've discussed maybe sort of some of the build up to how we got here.
Sure.
Is there any sort of comments you want to make on the immediate situation there, Jen, before we move on to discussing how we got here?
I do not. I want to get this out of the way first. I do not want this to sound like some sort of sports commentary. I promise that if that is the case, that is not my intention. I promise.
Yeah.
But it is very, so far has been extremely one-sided to the side of CSTO. Essentially, what has been happening is the battle begun with a bombardment using long-range rockets, short-range ballistic missiles, and aerial bombardment on every single points of command and control, supplies, so ammunition, and places of where troops assembly points before Ukrainian troops can go off to battle. Every single one of those points have been surgically striked and bombarded. So that is immediately has shut off the complete, put the Ukrainian military armed forces into paralysis, right?
Right.
And immediately following that, it was an invasion from Belarus, from the east with the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics, and from Crimea, of course. And what makes this all so difficult, so I want to knock this out of the way first, is the large amounts of use of what's called the Chinese definition that I'm familiar with of informational warfare is when an army contends for information dominance and superiority in any way, shape, or form, mostly using digital. So that means that there is a lot of electronic jamming equipments that's like resident in the Russian army ground forces that will always travel with the Russian ground forces that has managed to block out radio signals, cell signals, Wi-Fi, you name it. Yeah, it's basically a very powerful radio electromagnetic signal emission device with a very big generator that's put onto a Humvee-sized vehicle with a bunch of antennas that moves along with the forces. There's been that as being the cutoff of electric supplies from both Russia and Belarus, the two CSTO member nations that borders Ukraine. So some facilities in Ukraine have no electricity right now. And the internet has been scrambled and or shut down for the most part. So most information that comes out of there's barely any information that comes out of that at all. So if we were to look at the south city of Port of Odessa, this rumor of a marine landing has been hotly debated. It's not as simple as, oh, it's just a rumor. It is more of a problem of there has been visual sightings of the Russian Marines. The Military Pehota, essentially. That's the name. Excuse my pronunciation. Coming towards like one of the island that has like Ukrainian like a Ukrainian observation post in the Black Sea that is too small to see on this map.
Right.
That was the last thing that was confirmed on the internet, because afterwards, since their signal and communication has been jammed, we cannot confirm or deny either way of whether or not there's actually Russian amphibious troops.
Right.
So this is like the kind of the difficulty that not just us amateurs, but mainstream professional medias and even intelligence agencies
so this is something that
in terms of getting their hands on accurate information.
Right. So specifically on Odessa, the only reason that I managed to confirm for myself that Odessa hadn't been invaded yesterday was that I contacted one of the guys we spoke to for the podcast who lives in Odessa.
I see.
I said, are the Russians on the beach? And he said, no, it's not. Yeah. There's nothing here. But bear in mind, so there's lots of different reports. Maskirovka, there's information operations. There's all types of information going on. So from Russian side as well as Ukrainian side, people will. Information is also a part of the war. So putting out reports, releasing footage.
So there's this footage of a column of tanks destroyed, right?
Yeah.
I've seen the same footage being described as, is it Ukrainian tank column being destroyed on the march? What, like before they even appear to battle, they're like on the roads? Yeah. Or is it like Russian forces being set up, caught in an ambush? But like it's more likely Ukrainian, because these tanks are modified versions of the T-64 tanks, which is from all the way back in the 1970s. Russia no longer operates them. Ukraine pulled those out of garages and scrapyards in order to fight this war, so we can confirm that one. But that's only because we have a reference point. If there's no reference point at all, then like everything is just off the charts, man.
So I think we're going to go into the sort of how we got here, and then we're going to come back to the current. But I'll just make one comment about this: is that history is back. If we wanted an example of sort of Francis Fukuyama being refuted once more again, the poor man being beaten up by everyone.
I was just joking with my comrades today, leading up to the preparation for this episode, that we should, like, if you want to be internet famous right now, go find Francis Fukuyama. Just stuff a microphone in his face, ask him how he feels about it. That's just if you're in the US. If you're in Russia, go do that to Gorbachev.
Yes, exactly.
That's like how you become a millionaire.
Right, exactly. I mean, one thing I'll mention though is obviously there's also one thing to mention here, that as much as Western leaders are talking about how terrible this is, war in Europe, war in our time, this is something from the 20th century. I think we should also remind ourselves that people in Yemen, people in Afghanistan, people in Iraq, people in Libya, people in Syria, people in many countries, Somalia, elsewhere, war has been life.
and
And
it's
been
a
more than, but more
philosophical.
than
It's very
years.
jarring
Yeah,
situation that
yeah.
how like you say, Richard, how people view war in general. Like somehow it's only a thing that's happening in one place.
Yeah,
It should only happen in these places. But how dare you have war be brought upon the land of the
exactly.
civilized?
Right, exactly. How dare you bring war here to the West, to Europe? My God.
Right.
But yes, so we must remind ourselves that we shouldn't be so dramatic and say, oh my God, there's war. Oh no, this is terrible. War never happens anymore. No, war is happening all the time for
Yeah.
many people.
Yeah, for sure.
The only difference is, of course, I do think the reason we've dedicated this is the difference between those wars and this war, particularly, is that the only thing that scares, I think I forgot who said this, the only thing that poses an immediate, right now, existential threat to the US government, to the Pentagon, is the Russian nuclear arsenal. There's nothing else in the world that can, right now, the flick of a switch, end the US government.
That's right. During the build up to the situation, it actually started with a Russian, what's called a strategic military exercise. That one, it is the all the Russian nuclear forces basically doing a dry run of their computerized cybernetics based strategic missile commands, and also the Russian state security agencies, which the Russian tradition in the Soviet tradition is a pretty big deal. I mean, at the height of the KGB, which is the predecessor to all this, they had like 200,000 employees. No corporation company has that many employees.
Yeah.
And what are they for? Well, they have been doing exercise for essentially rebuilding civilization after a nuclear war. I am not joking. That was the purpose of that exercise, and they actually went out and simulated what the logistics and the procedures would be needed for that kind of scenario. So and that is why Putin basically said that we are ready for any outcome. Like, he is not joking; he's just being honest. Whereas in the West, we have Biden. The whole country is acting like Biden. Anyways,
no, you're right. I think we're both getting ahead of ourselves here. We want to get into that stuff, the how, the why, the sort of. Also, I want to talk about Putin's speech, and I want to talk about lots of things. But we're going to start. So let's just roll the clock back a bit. How did we get here? So obviously, if you've been following our show, we already talked about this a number of times. So in 1991, with the breakup of the Soviet Union, the deal was between Gorbachev and Reagan and the West was that NATO would not go further east than Germany or Berlin, let's say. And that was not honored. Poland has joined, Romania has joined, the Baltic republics have joined. So that's obviously an important part of this discussion historically.
Yeah.
And that is specifically then the NATO question is why was what Putin wanted. He wanted an answer to the NATO question. Ukraine will not be in NATO. That was the red line. He didn't want, and I think one of the Russian commentaries was this, that when you have NATO involved, you no longer have a border with Ukraine. You have a border with America, and not just America, the American military. So
for sure, it only
discussion.
It only downgrades from here because, like, let's mention the economic context for this as well, which is even though politically the USSR was formally dissolved, in terms of economics and production and logistics and supply to just sustain day-to-day operations, it still is. It still needs to be a unified economic bloc. That's the only way it works. Because, I'm sorry, the rails, the electric lines, the roads, and the pipes have been built that way. So immediately to keep things functioning after the collapse of the USSR in 1991, Russia and Belarus and Ukraine, the three together signed a treaty of what's called the Union State. To just work out the market fluctuations just so that people can live. But what happened in 2014 is all of that is
hold on. We should play. We've got some
one step at a time.
But I think there was a BBC analyst, and I actually agreed with what he said. I don't often do this, but he said that he started his job as a Russia correspondent 30 years ago, and he started just 4 months before the break of the USSR. And he started, and on his passport it said USSR. 4 months later, it was gone. And he thought that's what he was covering. 30 years ago, his first job was covering the breakup of the USSR. And he said, actually, I'm still covering the breakup of the USSR. This is still the breakup of the USSR. Yeah. So he's talking about Kazakhstan. He was talking about last year in Armenia and Azerbaijan going to war with each other. The breakup of the USSR is still going on in very many ways. And like you said, it still exists, economically. So, but we're going to play for you now. So to give us context, so 1991, the end of the Soviet Union, the breakup of all the republics into their, color revolution, their tricolors, their nationalist sort of pieces that fell from the Soviet Union. We have then the Maidan movement, right? So Euromaidan. Now, what I'm going to play for you is the original file of Victoria Nuland speaking to Jeffrey Pyatt. So Victoria Nuland was the, I believe, Deputy Secretary of State. She's still in the cabinet or still works in the White House. She's still a top diplomat. But I'm going to play for you the phone call that was leaked where, they hacked her phone and you heard basically, I'm going to let it speak for itself. I'll let it speak for itself. So listen to this. It's 4 minutes. Give me 1 second just to connect this and we can then discuss how we feel about it after. So we have to remind ourselves of how we got to the moment. And this is a very fundamental piece to that discussion. So 1 second. Let's go for that. That's fine. Okay.
What do you think?
Can you hear that, Jen?
Yes.
Okay. I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obviously the complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as Deputy Prime Minister and some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now. So we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff. But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Yachts. And I'm glad you sort of put him on the spot on where he fits in this scenario. And I'm very glad he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, I guess. You think in terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking. In terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tonybook and his guys, and I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yachts is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Cleach and Tonybook on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week. I just think Cleach going in, he's going to be at that level, working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
I think that's right. Okay. Good. Do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
My understanding from that call, but you tell me, was that the big three were going into their own meeting, and that Yachts was going to offer in that context a three-way, the 3+1 conversation or 3+2 with you. Is that not how you understood it?
No, I think that's what he proposed, but I think just knowing the dynamic that's been with them where Klitschko's been the top dog, he's going to take a while to show up for whatever meeting they've got, and he's probably talking to his guys at this point. So I think you reaching out directly to him helps with the personality management among the three, and it gives you also a chance to move fast on all this stuff and put us behind it.
There's an echo. Sorry, 1 second.
They all sit down and he...
Jen, do you want to... there's an echo there. Sorry, you want to maybe not play your audio?
Oh, my mic is muted.
Okay. Maybe it's me then. Hold on.
No.
That's why he doesn't like
I sent you a chat of hey.
Okay, good. I'm happy. Why don't you reach out to him and see if he wants to talk before or after?
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Okay, I've now written. Oh, one more wrinkle for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
I can't remember if I told you this or if I only told Washington this, that when I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning, he had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. Did I write you that this morning?
Yeah, okay. I saw that.
He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, fuck the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it. And again, the fact that this is out there right now, I'm still trying to figure out in my mind why Yanukovych did that. But in the meantime, there's a Party of Regions faction meeting going on right now, and I'm sure there's a lively argument going on in that group at this point. But anyway, we could land jelly side up on this one if we move fast. So let me work on Klitschko, and if you can just keep, I think we want to try to get somebody with an international personality to come out here and help to midwife this thing. And then the other issue is some kind of outreach to Yanukovych, but we probably regroup on that tomorrow as we see how things start to fall into place.
So on that piece, Jeff, when I wrote the note, Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So
okay.
Biden's willing.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thanks.
What do you think?
Yep.
So get Biden to give an attaboy and secure the deets. Patch this thing together. Yats has got the economics bits. So-and-so get Ban Ki-moon to midwife this thing. Fuck the EU. I mean, apart from obviously everyone remembers this because you said fuck the EU, but there's something far more sinister at play in that conversation. That they
are talking about the process
the
of colonizing Ukraine so that the border of the American Empire can go right up against Russia. As that statement is.
But, right. So I feel like if someone says, oh, but is Ukraine really, is imperialism, U.S. imperialism really involved in this conversation? Is this really about? Surely this is purely about sovereignty of Ukraine, and that's all that's at hand here. And they should be able to decide for themselves who and what comes into their country, and NATO should be their decision. I mean, bear in mind, if you wanted proof, you say, well, actually, no, the U.S. government interferes and picks and has a very strong say in who is actually leading and in charge of Ukraine. If you say, oh, where's the proof of that? There's literally a phone call where they are discussing who they think and who they want to be in which position and how they're going to achieve that aim. And this is from 2014. So I don't know if you could have any better proof than someone saying,
exactly,
this is what we want. And also bear in mind, she apologized.
From the devil's own mouth. I mean,
right. And also she apologized for this phone call. So it's not like this is a deep fake or some shit like that. Yeah. She apologized. It's on the BBC. You can find it anywhere you want. This definitely happened. This is a material fact. Okay. But yeah, so this is a fundamental fact that we have to sort of mention. We're talking about
on this point, we might as well start talking about the greater kind of political philosophical context of why this event even happened in the first place to begin with. So then we have to ask, as you brought up, the fact that there is this talk of Ukrainian sovereignty, right? So then we have to ask what sovereignty is. Well, sovereignty is essentially like self-control of your own internal affairs, right? Then who does it belong to? Well, unfortunately, the highest unit, the largest unit that the current international law, which understand is the result of a kind of British imperialist architectural design of the desire to one, base things off of power, two, have military power be less effective than finance power, three, to have as many nations as possible. That way, for a country like Britain, U.S., France, Germany, so on and so forth, can less Germany. Let's talk about that later. Can divide and conquer. So, like, that's basically what your folks over at your internet schools of international relations, universities around the world, that's what they study. Right? And what they teach is that there is no such thing as there is this duality, there's this contradiction. On the one hand, every single nation is equal because all nations are equal because everything is abstract, and a nation is just a system of protocols and administration, and it's one is equal from the other. and somehow it's supposed to protect individual freedom. Let's ask the libertarians that; they'll go on for days. And then secondly, somehow that at the same time, small nations also don't matter. There's what's called like diplomatic realism, where it is purely done through where like what it even means to be a major power means it's not defined on your ability to construct, but your ability to destruct. So we as Marxists, we support the DPRK and all that, but it is still like, even from our perspective, a little insane to say that DPRK is more of a superpower than say Germany or Japan.
Right.
Right.
Because it has the ability to
because one has ballistic missiles, hypersonics, and nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Right.
So then, how do we then go about this question? How do we resolve the national question, essentially, in this kind of context of international law and diplomatic science? It clearly needs to be done. Well, then the only base unit of measurement that we should go off of is something that both includes nations, but is also above pure nationhood, which and is actually in accordance with how human history developed when we came out of the continent of Africa.
I feel like you're going to be going into civilization stuff. Right?
Yes, that's.
So hold on, wait. I think I do want to come back to this, but I think we should actually bring up some perspective on this from some of the communist parties, and then you can respond, I suppose, with your piece about civilization.
Yeah.
And because I think their critique is also their critique, and your answer to their critique is going to come from what you want to say. So I don't want to I don't want to go back and you have to explain the civilization.
Right. Okay, that's fair.
So let's just read something. So there are obviously lots of different opinions on what's going on, and even within communist parties. So obviously our job here at MTT is we try and cover different communist parties and workers' parties news and whatnot. So we have a statement here from joint statement of communist and workers' parties. So to specify who, this is from the Communist Party of Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, El Salvador, Greece, the Socialist Party of Latvia, the CP of Mexico, the New Communist Party of the Netherlands, the Philippines Communist Party, the Communist Party of Spain, and the CP of Turkey, as well as the Communist Front from Italy. So this is a joint statement from them, which they released yesterday, last afternoon, I think. Okay, so urgent. Joint statement of communist and workers' parties. No to the imperialist war in Ukraine. An independent struggle is needed against monopolies and bourgeois classes for the overthrow of capitalism, for the strengthening of the class struggle against imperialism war, for socialism. 1. The communist and workers' parties signing this joint statement are opposed to the imperialist conflict in Ukraine, which constitutes one of the consequences of the tragic situation for the peoples shaped after the overthrow of socialism and the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Both the bourgeois and the opportunist forces, which for years have fought against the USSR and recently celebrated the 30th anniversary of its dissolution, silencing the fact that the restoration of capitalism meant the dismantling of historic workers' and people's achievements and brought the peoples of the USSR back to the era of class exploitation and imperialist wars, are completely exposed. 2. The developments in Ukraine, which are taking place in the framework of monopoly capitalism, are linked to the US, NATO, and EU plans and their intervention in the region in the context of their fierce competition with capitalist Russia for the control of the markets, raw materials, and transport networks of the country. These pursuits are concealed by imperialist powers, which are in conflict, promoting their own pretexts such as defending democracy, self-defense, and one's right to choose their alliances, the compliance with the UN or OSCE principles, or supposedly fascism, while deliberately detaching fascism from the capitalist system that gives rise to it and utilizes it. 3. We denounce the activity of fascist and nationalist forces in Ukraine, anti-communism and the persecution of communists, the discrimination against the Russian-speaking population, the armed attacks of the Ukrainian government against the people in Donbass. We condemn the utilization of reactionary political forces of Ukraine, including fascist groups, by the Euro-Atlantic powers for the implementation of their plans. In addition, the anti-communist rhetoric against Lenin, the Bolsheviks, and the Soviet Union, to which the Russian leadership resorts to justify its own strategic plans in the region, is unacceptable. However, nothing can tarnish the enormous contribution of socialism in the Soviet Union, which was a multinational union of equal socialist republics. The decision of the Russian Federation to initially recognize the independence of these so-called People's Republics in Donbass and then to proceed to a Russian military intervention, which is taking place under the pretext of Russia's self-defense, the demilitarization and depacification of Ukraine, was not made to protect the people of the region or peace, but to promote the interests of Russian monopolies in Ukrainian territory and their fierce competition with Western monopolies. We express our solidarity with the communists and the peoples of Russia and Ukraine, and we stand on their side to strengthen the struggle against nationalism, which is fostered by each bourgeois. The peoples of both countries who lived in peace and jointly thrived in the framework of the USSR, as well as all other peoples, have no interest in siding with one or another imperialist or alliance that serves the interests of the monopolies. We highlight that the illusions fostered by bourgeois forces claiming that there could be a better security architecture in Europe by EU intervention, NATO without military plans and aggressive weapon systems in its territory, a pro-peace EU or a peaceful multipolar world, etc., are highly dangerous. All these assumptions have nothing to do with reality and are misleading for the anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist struggle seeking to cultivate the perception that peaceful imperialism may exist. However, the truth is that NATO and the EU, like any capitalist transnational union, are predatory alliances with a deeply reactionary nature that cannot become pro-people and will continue to act against workers and people's rights and the peoples that capitalism goes hand in hand with imperialist wars. We call on the peoples of the countries whose governments are involved in the developments, especially through NATO and the EU, but also Russia, to struggle against the propaganda of the bourgeois forces that lure the people to the meat grind of imperialist war using various spurious pretexts, to demand the closure of military bases, the return home of troops from missions abroad, to strengthen the struggle for the disengagement of the countries from imperialist plans and alliances such as NATO and the EU. 7. The interest of the working class and the popular strata requires us to strengthen the class criterion for analyzing the developments, to chart our own independent path against monopolies and bourgeois classes, for the overthrow of capitalism, for the strengthening of the class struggle against imperialist war, for socialism which remains as timely and necessarily as ever. So that is the statement there. I think the first thing I might say to that is we have to remember that the Russian Communist Party also made a statement a few days ago saying that the recognition of the LPR and the DPR was of immediate requirement. Actually, we read that statement
last week,
and it was quite prescient, or sort of, it happened. So we read that statement. So Zhugani, always get his name wrong, the leader of the Russian Communist Party, Zyuganov, he read that, he made that statement saying we must recognize the DPR and LPR, and then Putin did a few days later. But he also mentioned, so these communist parties, I've read their statement. You can make your own opinion on what you think of that. But I must say that the Russian Communist Party also made a statement in which they talk about the fact that the Bandera, the fascists in Ukraine, and the aggression by NATO is an immediate threat to the Russian people as well as the Ukrainian people. And so there's not, it's not just one perspective on this amongst communists. There's certainly.
So let's I'm gonna go at this from every single angle that there exists in the human conception. Firstly, Ukraine. Well, Ukraine is the regime that is the collaboration of a group. One is the liberal government, that is a bunch of liberals who are good at nothing but street politics and liberal campaigning for politicians. And group two is they won their hard power against the previous government using the literal Nazis in the most literal sense. In 2014, they were, if you've seen the Vice documentary, they were the ones that fought against Russia on the border. And they were full Nazi gangs. They themselves agreed to that. Everybody else agrees to that. You look on their battle insignias, on their helmets, on their uniforms. There is SS symbology. There is a Nazi black sun all over the places. And then what happened after 2016? Well, every single one of them, from the soldier to the officer, gets admitted into the armed forces of Ukraine. No questions asked. And so we have a situation where Ukraine is no longer a modern nation. It is not its military does not obey its civilian control, because the military is a bunch of literal gangsters, and the silly government is led by a literal comedian.
Yeah,
So
I would say that's something that we
that's
mentioned.
not even an insult.
Yes.
That's what he actually is.
He's an actual comedian. Yes, that's true.
So during the lead up to this, right? Ukraine talked about Ukrainian government and the Ministry of Defense said openly that we are not aware of opening fire on Lugansk and LPR and DPR and all that, right? And they did not order it. I suspect that is true, because what happens when you do not control the weapon is that the weapon controls you. The Nazis single-handedly just started doing whatever with their heavy weaponries outside of the control of the Ukrainian government. As bad as the Ukrainian government is, that's not exactly their doing. And so if we look closely, there's a few things. One is that, why did Russia CSTO start this attack? Well, it's very simple. Even after the CSTO forces moved in to basically act as a human shield between, the Nazi artillery guns and the civilian compounds in Luhansk and Donetsk, they still kept firing because they have no discipline. They're bloodthirsty, and that's what they do. I predicted that last week, and I've been hinting at this for many weeks now. It came to be true. And so, what do you do to that? Well, you search and destroy. You search and hunt down every single significant Nazi commander, and you encircle the rest to make them give up arms. Right? There is a radio communique by the Russian Minister of Defense, Shoigu, basically saying that, quote, and I'm quoting here, okay, quote, taking into account the fact that the military personnel of the armed forces of Ukraine, unlike the nationalists, Nazis, took an oath to the Ukrainian people and obeyed orders, treat them with respect. Work out the creation of a safe corridors for the safe exit of Ukrainian servicemen who had laid down their arms from the areas of the operations to their families. That is, indeed what's objectively been happening. That's just what that is. So, what we get now is a situation where some of the locations of the bombings might seem random when we first mentioned the deep.
Yes.
The in-depth long-range bombing. It was directed at there was this one very unique situation. I believe it was the 72nd. I believe brigade of battalion of digital disinformation headquarters that is on the outskirts of Kiev. That is an office building, because literally a militarized internet troll farm of the Ukrainian military filled with 90% of Nazis.
Right.
Was bombed by a missile. That's not cruelty. That's just called removing it through long-range means.
Sure.
Well, any other communist governments would have done the same if you truly are communist.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's get on to imperialism. We must not. Nicely. Those are the insignias that they use.
Right. So I mean, we're just addressing this question. So, the description by Putin, by Russia, is obviously denazification is a part of this, de-arming or demilitarizing denazification.
Denazification through kinetic means.
Right. And to be honest, so I think I have to sort of apply some criticism to the Russian side of this, in the sense that there are Nazi units in Ukraine. There's the Azov battalion, which is very well,
which has been wiped out as a military unit.
Apparently that's gone. Apparently that has gone to Mariupol, as you're saying, the Mariupol defense line. But we'll come back to the military situation in a second. But yes, there are Nazis in Ukraine, and that is certainly, no one likes Nazis. But I think we should also remember that I think that the geopolitics of NATO, of Ukraine becoming a NATO member, and them not wanting to negotiate that and not make that the West not wanting to make that a sort of a thing that they're willing to concede, as well as the Ukrainians, I still think that's the most important piece here. I don't think that the main reason that Putin and Russia have invaded is because of the Azov battalion.
Well,
Azov
it
battalion.
certainly is the trigger, so it's the equivalent
It's
of
part of the narrative.
then,
It's part of the narrative. It's certainly.
So
it's
we
certainly,
can say like it's the trigger that caused it to happen. The main
Right.
reason is the geopolitics that you described.
Yeah, I think we all know that the main reason here is the geopolitics. I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's fooling themselves in saying that
Yeah.
the only reason they're going to Russia to Ukraine is to fight the Azov battalion and to get rid of the Nazi units. And I think also bear in mind, yes, there are Nazi units, but the entire army is not a Nazi army. I think we should also-
okay. Let's be honest.
I understand that there's a problem with that. It's like, well, if you allow to have your army to have one Nazi unit, then it's effectively
Well, no.
They
So
support each
to
other.
clarify on that, that's actually a very definitive point. We know that a good majority of the units in the Ukrainian military were 1-for-1, 1 man per 1 man, 1 person per person, 1 gun per gun. The Nazi formations of nationalists, and what is also needs to be taken into account is the treatment of POWs after they give up arms is very civilized and very proper, and there is no such thing as like just gunning everyone down. It's not quite that. Is usually what's been happening is Ukrainian forces will suffer like 10 to 12 casualty per formation of like on average 800 to 1,000 men, and then they realize that they're encircled, that they can't win. They will surrender, and then they will be treated peacefully. Or in other situations when the anti-tank rockets, the NLAWs, disposable rockets, when they realize that, oh wow, it doesn't work against T80 T80DU. Oh wow, what a surprise! We can't beat them. Let's just surrender. That's like actually what's been happening. So I want to move on to the point of imperialism.
Yeah, I would say come back to the imperialism and
concept
civilization.
this is like some postmodernist nonsense. Because if we really were to, like, for a minute, look at where the concept of imperialism came from, it came from some liberal economists back in the late 1800s, towards the very end of the 1800s, describing this phenomena of essentially colonialism, but with capitalism, right? But there were so many logical inconsistencies that prompted Vladimir Ilyich Lenin to write a whole paper called Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, in which he clarified every single logical inconsistencies and codified the term imperialism into meaning the only things that can make logical sense.
Would you like to
read capitalism, where it is done by finance capital, where it is no longer about exporting products, where it is no longer international rivalry, inter-nation rivalry, but the systemic export of capital for the sake for the sake of a monopolization of the world.
I'll read them here for you, Jen. I've got Lenin's 5-point definition.
Is it going to take too long? I mean, seriously.
No. It's short. It's short. So Lenin summarizes definition. No, of course.
It was pretty long. Well,
Lenin can be pretty. Let's see if this is an accurate summary here. So 1, the concentration of production and capital developed to such a high stage that it created monopolies which play a decisive role in economic life. 2, the merging of bank capital with industrial capital and the creation on the basis of this finance capital of a financial oligarchy. 3, the export of capital, which has become extremely important as distinguished from the export of commodities. 4, the formation of international capitalist monopolies, which share the world among themselves. 5, the territorial division of the whole world among the greatest capitalist powers is completed. Okay, so that's the 5 points.
Yeah. So
this point, financial oligarchy. Yeah, so
like I feel ridiculous saying this. Okay, I promise. But like, look at it.
No.
Please just look at it. Does it fit? Is it finance capital?
No. So I think it was John McCain. John McCain. I think this is not a fair description, but it certainly does explain some of the lack of development there is in Russia, in modern Russia, today's Russia. John McCain said, "Who are we dealing with here? It's a gas station with nukes. That's what it is. Like that's what."
Okay, yeah, Russia. No, fair enough. It's if anything, it's a resource based. It's a mercantile economy. If you want to be like a bit degrading to the Russian people and all that,
right?
But like finance, are you kidding me?
Right.
Are
you insane? The idea of
have
Russia,
they lost their minds? Okay, so let's go back to history. All right, let's. There during Lenin's time, that was notice before and during World War I. Okay, where there are like the Bank of Germany, and like the French capitalist bank Asiatique, I think, something like that. And then it was the British, and then it was the American Citibank. If you shop at Costco, you have a Citibank credit card account. My mom does because we get cheaper food there. Sorry. Anyways, getting back to point. After the two world wars, the city of London, which is the Wall Street of London, it's like a little section of plot of land. That's the Wall Street in London. I know names. And then the actual physical Wall Street in New York City. The two banking industries basically linked together. They were the ones that sponsored Hitler, for example, for the armament to try to destroy the Soviet Union. They were the industrial capital that swallowed up the industry of the American industrial capital after the 50s. They were the ones that are behind the IMF, as we know and are familiar with it today. Because remember, a German imperialism, a French imperialism, and a British American imperialism. What happens when the British American ones became one and the other two just disappears? It's called you have one imperialism. Do the math, people.
Yeah.
And to just this like absurd notion, I know where it comes from. It comes from this purely emotionally based, non-logical association of big nation, conventional armies with tanks, missiles, planes, and satellites doing stuff. That's imperialism, apparently. Because of who knows what brand of liberal anarcho thought that has been mixed into contemporary Western socialist brains these days. But anyways,
right.
It gets hilarious because just because nations do stuff. That's why I started the conversation, by the way, with a basic layout of the messed up state of international law, diplomatic conventions. Because if you notice, the Marxist description of what a nation is the tool of one class to oppress the other, right? The systemic application of violence of one class against another.
Yeah,
that is true. But there is a problem that is in this situation, not just with Marxism, not just with any specifics, not just this situation either, which is our definition of what constitutes a society. And this question, I swear, has been like bothering the West for the longest time. So I'm gonna quote one of my favorite scholars, not necessarily a Marxist, but certainly a Marxist in the general sense, studying Chinese history. Professor Fan Yongpeng is the vice president of the China Studies at Fudan University, which is one of the top universities in China in my hometown, Shanghai. He basically said that the reason that the Europeans see things from a nation or city-state perspective instead of a grander perspective is because they have a history ever since the collapse of Western Roman Empire. There has never been a tradition of unity. It's just finer and finer the excursions. So the logic basically goes this barbaric tradition in the Roman sense, not in our sense. That's what the Romans call them. And in the Chinese,
and the Chinese
call them the same thing, which is there's no spirit of cooperation. It's all about like your genetic tribe, and then if the two tribes are inhabiting the same piece of land, a war breaks out, and the loser migrates and does an exodus to like a piece of land that is further northwest, to where it's colder and less fertile, and it just keeps going until we have reached the end of the Nordic Isles. And that is the basically in one sentence summary of the history of Europe, with the exception of Greece and Rome and the Eastern Rome and all that. That's a problem. That's why your Western political analysts and scientists and theorists insist that there is nothing bigger than the nation, but there really is. It's called a civilization.
Right.
So like there is clearly this divergence in thought then. Nation states for its own sake, and nobody knows what it is, It is both the highest thing and the most illegitimate things at the same time. Where like a nation as small as like say Singapore or like some sort of like a one-off city is just as a sovereign, just as legitimate and equal to like some like clearly a nation with actual cultural heritage that goes back thousands of years.
Sure,
that's insane in every metrics. So then, what is a civilization? Well, it's something that has to satisfy a few things. Its set of language that they use has to describe a conception of the world, like creation myth, and then that has to translate into the day-to-day political beliefs of the people in the circle for a sphere of influence for a long, long time. They can create, they can be born, they can die, and they can be after they die, they can be synthesized into other things. So, for example, China, according to the scholar Martin Jacques, China is a civilizational state.
Yes.
You can kind of say all of Western Europe is a civilization, the descendants of the Roman tradition, a Western Roman tradition.
Yes.
Russia, the Slavic people, is the synthesis of two traditions, because the Byzantine tradition of Eastern Rome and the Mongolian tradition. The Tsar is both the emperor of Byzantine and the Khan of the steppes. So the two-eagled head and all that. And then you have the Persian civilization that goes all the way back to the first civilization in the world, by the way. You have the Ethiopian civilization on the African continent, which is a mix of a successor of the Egyptian tradition and Christianity, as Christ's disciples spread and all that. On the American continent, you have the settler colony of North America. It's fucked, but sure, it's a thing, I guess. Then you have the Bolivarian legacy. Simon Bolivar, who formed this idea of the Grand Colombia, right? And like essentially Venezuela, Colombia, Panama,
northern South
and Nicaragua should be seen as like more or less one entity. Like it has to exist in the minds and the hearts of the local people in order for it to count. So we see now, of course, Brazil. There are many others, of course, but I'm only naming a few here. These are the ones that came to mind. If you want to use video game reference, it is all the pre-DLC factions that you can play on Civ. That's
okay.
Okay.
Cool.
So what is this? What is
we
talking about all this? Well, because this is a way to explain how do we still describe the phenomenon that is nationalism, nationhood, ethnic, ethnos, right? But how do we still be not Eurocentric, not be racist? Because the academic tradition of Britain and France basically started saying that only Britain and France is civilization. Everything else is barbarians. The German scholars of the mid to late 1800s really, really heavily complain about this. Why do you guys not see us as civilization? Well, screw you. We will out-science you. And hence German engineering and science.
But let's bring this back. How does this relate to what we're talking about today, Ukraine?
Well, it's very simple. Russia is not acting... Russia is a civilizational state, much like China is. Russia is the Slavic, the concept of the Tsar, right? After the deceased civilizational state of the Mongolian conquest and all that. Is not only acting on behalf of the Russian oligarchs of the technical Russian Federation and the Russian Duma and all that. It's not just a simple machine. There's more to it. It is a civilizational state that is acting on the behalf of the civilizational tradition of Eastern Rome and the successor of the Mongolian legacy. It's more. It's just. It so happens that the center of it sits in a city that is Moscow, that you can't really geographically move. That like tank tracks or whatever.
So because it's a civilizational state, this affects the. 1 second. Also, I'm put a big message on.
Oh wow!
Sorry.
Just because a civilization is doing civilizational activities, one of which includes warfare, that has happened for thousands of years, by the way. It doesn't mean it's imperialism. People really have to be out of their minds to think that. And also at the same time that civilization is the highest thing that we can possibly have until we reach the true kind of workers' international. Until then, like, what basis do you socially have to organize people of different culture, different language, different beliefs, so on and so forth? You certainly can't do it by nations. All Marxists know that. We were just talking about how insane the idea of like the pure nation state is.
Sure.
So here we are, I guess.
Right.
And to look at, I also want to point out one more thing. To look at things in the pure terms of nations is exactly what the original inventors of the current international conventions, which is the actual British American imperialism, wanted. It wants to implant this idea that only they are civilization and nobody else is. Right. And therefore everybody else is just separated nation states that doesn't mean anything. But we are the Western democratic civilization NATO, that's like spreading democracy and
Atlantic Alliance. Sure.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's like, if you insist on that, that's just called being a racist Eurocentric.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so we do have to wrap it up now. This is, I mean, we're talking about a pretty big event. This has been the build-up for 2 or 3 months of our coverage since we've done this show. So we'll be coming back next week. Maybe we might do a special this weekend. I don't know. We'll see if anything interesting happens. Maybe might be able to do something on this one specifically.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the on-the-ground stuff, so the actual military situation, as you can see, watching Kiev right now. That's South China Morning Post. Kiev itself is still run by Ukraine. The only comment that I heard is that the Russians said that they expect Zelensky to flee in a matter of days, but we'll see.
Right. American and European military generals have and professionals have stated something like, we expect Kiev to fall in 96 hours. Last time I checked, it was that was the American general. Last time I checked was the European official saying, it'll be 72 hours.
Yeah.
I mean,
the other thing I want to add there is that yesterday I looked at RT during the first phases of this situation, they were saying it's a minor operation in the Donbass. So just on the specific, again, coming back to the military situation, that this was an operation to support LPR and DPR in the conflict in Donbass to defend them. They asked for help because they were being shelled by the Ukrainian forces. And then if you take that to be the case, that it's a minor operation in the Donbass, then everything else seems to be a supporting operation. So they're knocking out the air defenses, which requires, cruise striking, missile striking, various sites across the country. So which explains why Odessa was a hit. It explains why there's troops in Kharkov, explains why there's troops and other strikes taking place across the country. The last thing I did read was that, I don't know, there's more than nearly, it was 20 hours ago, the Russians had declared that they'd already knocked out all of the Ukrainian air defense.
Yes.
Ukrainians had said they'd shot down five helicopters.
I want to, based off of the basic things that we have right now, there's a few observations that can be made from a purely military perspective. So from what it looks like, the Russian Grad rockets is able to hit Ukrainian air bases. That's bad. The thing's firing range is only 27 kilometers.
Right.
So like for like planes, you want them to fly out far. You don't want your airbase to be close to the enemy. So typically, as an army moves, the artillery is further behind armor, which is further behind infantry, right? And then logistics and air defense is typically with artillery, though it could be closer up to the front if we're talking the Russian doctrine. If that thing, which is further back, is already in like less than 30 kilometers, what is that? What does that mean then? For the things that's in front of it, that's protecting it. They're in your face. That's what that means. And so we have
Yeah.
confirmation of Chechen special forces in the forests right outside of Kiev. And then hours after, we heard news of CSTO forces seizing the airport outside of Kiev. And then after that, we seeing there's been sightings of 18 IL-76. They're transport planes, carries like roughly around 45 tons of cargo per plane. Big old thing. 18 of them flying in towards from northeast to the Kiev direction, presumably landing at the airport to dump off airborne highly elite VDV troops.
So just so I can add that, that's Gostomel. So that's a military airport north of Kiev, not the Ukrainian.
Kiev. I figured. Right.
Gostomel. So it's north of Ukraine. It's a military airport, so not the main airport. But there's
been footages of the Russian Air Force doing like perfect parade formation, flying low, like showing off on top of like Ukrainian cities that still have like air raid sirens. A bunch of like basically every single type of military aircraft that's not a helicopter there is. And then we have because like essentially we can guess the outcome of the clown of a government that is the Zelensky regime, essentially with the civilian authority and the military completely like detached, with the head and the body detached, right? They're unable to formulate a cohesive anything in terms of warfare, really. So what you saw was, as soon as in the field, in open terrain, that's not in the city, if Ukrainian forces get surrounded, they just immediately surrender. And also there was no attempt by other friendly forces, allies, to say like, if I am surrounded here, to like attack in this direction for like an extraction evacuation effort. There was none of that. We never saw that. This is a lower level of organization than World War I.
Right.
This is like an insane level of incompetency. And then on the other hand, we have, we don't know this is necessarily true, it's likely true, on Reddit, of all places, I know, of like actual Ukrainian Nazis basically showing off with like gang signs and their guns and faces in like group pictures saying like, oh, come here, you Russian pigs, you are worst. And then immediately hours after, we see footages of like their headquarters, Nazi club headquarter buildings getting blown up by missiles.
So I think, I want to add the description. I don't think it's just a minor operation in Donbass, but the fact that they've got troops in Kharkov and troops coming in from Belarus.
Like I said, the only reason
we've got to close. I think there'll be more than enough discussion of this. I don't think that we can. Well, this is an ongoing event.
The problem is we haven't even gotten through most of it.
What's that?
We haven't even gotten through at least like half of it of the military situation.
No, we haven't. We have run out of time, though, man. We have run out of time. Sorry. We're gonna have to maybe we'll have to do a special on this on the weekend.
Sure.
If you want.
I mean, maybe on Sunday we'll do like a purely
I think we can just do
an update kind of analysis.
Yeah, we can do it. I'm sorry, but we are out of time, so we have to.
Fair enough. All right.
Okay, so we'll be definitely back on Friday. We'll put an update, a schedule up if we are going to do a Sunday or Saturday update. Depends on what happens in the news in the next 12 hours. But yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll catch up with you next week or sooner. Thanks, Jin.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh yeah, sorry, man.